Are you supplementing with vitamin D in the winter? Or how do you feel about vitamin D specifically?
It's a super interesting question that is still something all this stuff I'm always researching, and so I don't want to say anything is ever final. Uh, but I just did an interesting experiment, and I'll tell a little bit about it to highlight some of the vitamin D, my thoughts around vitamin D. One is so I just finished basically a 2 year where I did 18 months where I bulked up. So I increased the food I was eating for 18 months. I put on like 35 pounds, and then I did a 6 month cut. So I'm pretty skinny right now. People can probably see it in my face if they're watching the video. I got lean over the last 6 months. And I did this all eating the same three foods: beef, milk, and eggs, raw milk. Uh, and I got blood work at the end of the 18-month bulk. So that was this past February, and my vitamin D was low. And it kind of made sense to me. I was just coming out of a long Missouri winter. I was also fattening up. So as I was fattening up, that those larger adipocytes, fat cells, have even more room to sequester vitamin D. And so it kind of made sense that my vitamin D was low. And I hypothesized at the time, I was like, I'm about to do a 6 month cut. So we're going into the St. Louis summer. I'm going to lose the fat. And I think that alone is going to bring my vitamin D back up. And I just got my blood work done, literally got the results last week, and my vitamin D more than doubled. So it went from low to, in the good upper range. It was 50 something when I just took it. And so it brought the question of there's a few interesting things. Is one is I think the seasonality of lower vitamin D to higher vitamin D is probably physiological norm. I wouldn't worry about vitamin D dropping a little bit in the winter months and then rising in the summer months. I would worry if like someone doesn't ever get out in the sun. And it's like, so you go through a winter, your vitamin D is low, but in the summer, you don't intentionally get out in the sun and get your vitamin D up, or if you have excess body fat, things like that, then I would really worry about it. But from an ancestral perspective, I don't think necessarily lower levels of vitamin D through the winter is necessarily detriment. Long answer to saying like I probably will not supplement vitamin D in the winter. One last note on this that I've been thinking about recently is I traditionally do like because I'm into fitness, like physique stuff, kind of a bodybuilder stuff for just pure vanity reasons and fun. I think it's like the art and science of like body composition stuff I enjoy, and I've enjoyed it for 20 years. Uh, but one thing I've always kind of done, which is not ancestrally consistent, and I think is probably not ideal, is I will bulk through like the fall and the winter. So meaning I'll gain fat through this time. And then during the spring and summer, you cut down because you want to be lean in the summer and bulk up in the winter. It makes sense. But ancestrally, it would be opposite if you think about it. Like during the summer, you likely have more food, more abundance. And then during the winter cold months, you would probably have less access to food where you would actually be leaning out in the winter. And that would make more sense with vitamin D levels. I mean, you'd be losing the fat in the winter in combination with getting less sun, which would regulate that, which could regulate the vitamin D levels. Whereas in the summer, you're getting more sun but more body fat, which would balance out the vitamin D levels. So I actually, from an ancestral perspective, that's kind of like my thinking around vitamin D.
Is there any reason you wouldn't take a supplement in the winter just to top up? Is it just to be totally natural, or any detriment to doing that?
It's a combination of things. I have my general stance on supplements is that they do more harm than good in most circumstance, and people just take them haphazardly and don't really know why or when or what's the rationale behind it. Just like take this supplement, and the body regulates things in a very complex mechanism. Like for example, you say like, why not take vitamin D during the winter? Well, then I'd ask someone like, well, are you taking vitamin K too? And they'd be like, what? I got to take vitamin K2 too? I'm like, well, yeah, if you're going to take vitamin D, you need to make sure you got adequate K2. Like, okay, so I'll take vitamin D, vitamin K. I was like, oh, what about vitamin A? Are you getting vitamin A? Because these fat soluble vitamins work in concert together. And taking a bunch of vitamin A can throw your vitamin K off. And it's massively complex. And I've written up on vitamin D before where I give my recommendations. If you're taking this much vitamin D, I would take this much K2, and you want to make sure you're getting this much vitamin A, but also like that's my best guess from the research I've done. The body is extremely complex, and it's not just these three fat soluble vitamins. It's also minerals at play and a whole bunch of other stuff. Like just exposure to light plays a huge role because that's going to be our main source of vitamin D. So there's so many complex factors to take into account, and you shouldn't. If you think about it, you shouldn't need supplements unless you're eating like if you're eating a proper diet. And there's some arguments for needing it, like our soil doesn't have as much minerals as it did, XYZ. And I get it. So I entertain those conversations and arguments. But my default is to avoid supplementation if you can. And if there is a legit problem, both like subjectively and objectively, like lab results and you feel off, like, yeah, we definitely want to take a look and maybe supplement. But I don't think vitamin D supplement, like people just take 10,000 IU a day, don't even think twice about it. Um, I think there's potential downsides, and that's just based on reading a lot of the literature around, multivitamins and vitamin D in particular. That I think it's better if you don't have to take it. But if you're chronically low and you're not getting sun and you're not feeling good, I would consider supplementing it.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch the full episode. I'll see you over there.
If we take those 300,000 years, we put them on a 24-hour clock. The first 23 hours, we don't see cavities in the fossil record. We don't see periodontal disease in the fossil record. We don't see malocclusion in the fossil record. We don't really see abscesses in the fossil record. But something happens 1 hour.